synapses between the neurons in my brain and the neurons in my spinal cord, which talk to my muscles, bless you. If those synapses aren't working, I can think all I want that I want to kick my foot, and it's not going to happen, right? So if there's no communication here, nothing happens. So the synapse is really key. Now, you're going to be talking about, you're going to be looking at some cases, some neurologic cases of diseases. So I want to talk a little bit about what kinds of things can go wrong to make synapses not work, and what kinds of things can go right to make synapses work better. Okay? So, what can go wrong to make synapses not work so well? Well, how does information travel from one nerve cell to the other across the synapse? Yes, sir.
Neurotransmitters.
Excellent. Neurotransmitters. Can you tell us what a neurotransmitter is? What are neurotransmitters? You're right, they communicate across the synapse. Okay, anybody else? What are neurotransmitters? Are they cells? Are they, what are they? They send, well, they send electrical signals. What are they? Right, they're chemicals. Very good. So they're molecules. So, neurotransmitters in this cell travel across the synapse to the next cell. And what does the next cell have that allows it to respond to the neurotransmitter? What does the second cell have? Receptor. Excellent. Okay. So here, there's another molecule called the receptor that the neurotransmitter fits into and sends the electrical signal across the synapse. So an electrical signal comes down this axon, action potentials come down this axon. When they get here, they cause the transmitter to be released. It binds to a receptor here, and the electrical signal keeps going. Okay, did the medical students tell you that? Sort of? Okay. So electrical energy gets transformed into chemical energy, which then gets turned back into electrical energy. And that's how the impulse travels across the synapse. Okay? So, just based on what you know, give me some ideas as to what kind of things could go wrong to cause disease and make your synapses not work. Someone in the back, yes. Right, so I'm asking, what kind of things do you think could go wrong to cause your synapses not to work? Look, Stroke, okay, very good. Now, how would a stroke, has anyone told you about stroke yet? Not really. Okay, so stroke causes nerve cells to die. Okay? So if this nerve cell dies, there's going to be no transmitter to send it across the synapse, and there's going to be no signal. So stroke, very good. Stroke is one kind of condition which causes the cell to die and then the synapse doesn't work. What's another thing that could go wrong, just based on what I've told you, that would cause the synapse not to work?
Yeah, sort of trauma.
Trauma, okay. So trauma also could cause cells to die, similar to, stroke is actually a kind of trauma. You're thinking about like a head trauma or something. Right, so trauma could also cause cells to die and the synapses wouldn't work.
Spinal injury?
That's a kind of trauma, okay? So I'm thinking, let's think now down more on a molecular level. What kinds of things, based on what I've told you, could go wrong to cause a synapse not to work? Yes? Excellent, a chemical imbalance. Okay, so anybody know of a disease where there's chemical imbalance? Epilepsy, maybe. Depression, we think. Schizophrenia.
What is that called?
Schizophrenia is an example where there's an imbalance of chemicals in the brain. So let's say that you have not enough transmitter here, okay? Then your synapse isn't going to work right, okay? So a chemical imbalance is one thing that could cause synapses not to work. So I'm going to give you a few answers to my own question. You got a burning answer?
Bipolar.
Okay, bipolar, that would still be in the category of psychiatric diseases like schizophrenia, where we think there's a chemical imbalance. Yes?
A tumor?
Tumor, yeah, a tumor could cause nerve cells to die. But here's where I want to take this. So, anybody ever heard of botulism?
No.
Botulism is a kind of poisoning that comes from food that hasn't been canned properly. It's not such a problem in this country because we have a very good food production system, but around the world botulism is a problem. Botulism is caused by bacteria that grows in food that hasn't been processed properly. And the toxin that these bacteria make causes these neurotransmitter molecules not to be able to move out of the first cell when the action potential comes along. So botulism, or food poisoning, actually stops the neurotransmission process. Synapses don't work and people die because all of their synapses actually shut down. They can't breathe because they can't move their lungs. Okay? So there are toxins that in red which block this process. Okay? There are other diseases. There's one called myasthenia gravis, where people lose control of their muscles because for some reason their body makes antibodies against the transmitter receptor. And the receptors don't work anymore. So you can have problems that cause the cells to die. You can have problems that block transmitter release. You can have disease processes that block the receptors. Any one of these things will cause synapses not to work. Okay? Now what about this myelin here? Can you think of a way that a problem with the myelin would cause a synapse not to work? Yes.
If there's no myelin, then the cells that's being transferred or whatever, they will protect it, so it might be like a problem for the person.
Okay, so if there's not myelin, you're saying, there could be a problem. What kind of problem, based on what you know? It'll expose the axon, right? And what kind of problem will that cause?
It might move slower.
Say that again? What moves slower? Action potential. Perfect. Perfect answer. All of your answers together are the complete answer. So there's a very common neurologic disease, relatively common. Anybody know what it is? Where the myelin breaks down? You ever heard of multiple sclerosis?
Oh, yes.
Multiple sclerosis. That's a problem where the myelin degenerates. Okay? The myelin degenerates, the action potentials move slower, many of them don't even make it down here, and if the action potential doesn't get down here, what is not going to happen? So what happens if the action potential doesn't get here?
It won't get changed.
Anybody? So if the action potential doesn't get down here, the transmitter won't be released.
Right.
And there's no communication. Okay? Okay. So we've spoken about stroke, trauma, schizophrenia, multiple sclerosis, botulism, food poisoning. Okay? Now, do you want to know what messes up synapses big time? Big time. Cocaine. Cocaine. Cocaine disrupts the process of neurotransmitter function at the synapse, particularly a transmitter called dopamine. Okay, so think about dope, like in stupid, when you think about cocaine. Why? Because cocaine screws up the way dopamine works at the synapse, and the dopamine becomes hyperactive. So these synapses start working overtime, too much. And that causes long-term changes in the postsynaptic cell that create what we call addiction, where you need more and more to satisfy your habit. So when you go down the road of cocaine, you go down a road that permanently affects the functioning of your neurons. Okay? I mean, it can be undone with a lot of hard work, but it's not just a one-time thing. Cocaine creates a whole chain of events, which we're not going to talk about in detail today, that changes the way your nerve cells function. It makes it very hard to come back. You can do it, but it takes a lot of hard work, as anyone who's watched anyone deal with addiction knows. So it screws up the way neurotransmitters work, which messes up the postsynaptic cell, and all the way down the chain. So you're playing with fire because it affects how your nerve cells work. Yes.
So how long will a person have to be on crack in order, well, cocaine, in order for the whole thing to shut down?
I'm not saying the whole thing shuts down. I'm saying the whole thing changes the way it functions. Okay? I mean, it can happen after one exposure. Okay? So, just a word of warning to the wise. All right. So we've talked about some ways that synapses can stop functioning, okay, or function poorly in disease or in addiction. Okay. But how do you make synapses work better? How do you make synapses work better? Eat right, sleep good food. So can you think of a situation in which you would want to make more synapses, or make the synapses that you have even stronger?
Like a sport, you need to have quick reflexes.
Okay, like a sport, you want to have quick reflexes. So you might want to improve the pathways that mediate those reflexes. Okay, so another example.
Like if you're like trying to do something, it kind of like a second nature.
Good, so you're trying to do something over and over again, so it becomes like second nature. Okay, something else. So both of these examples are really talking about learning. Okay? So learning changes your synapses. So you could think of your years here at John Hay School of Science and Medicine as synapse exercises. What you're doing here is building bigger and better synapses. All right? And that's the truth. Learning changes synapses. When you learn something, you're strengthening specific synapses. Okay? So let's look at ways. So we looked at ways that you can make synapses work less well. Now we're going to look at ways that you can make synapses work better. Okay? So we're going to take out the X's. Okay, so just based on what I've told you and what's up on the board, what are some ways that you think you could make a synapse stronger? No. Let me make my question more clear. In terms of the kinds of mechanisms we've spoken about, molecules and things, what do you think you could do to make a synapse stronger? If you were an engineer and you were engineering synapses, what could you do to make these synapses stronger? Make the gap closer, okay. Increase the myelin, okay.
Increase receptors.
Okay, so let's write these ideas down. Increase myelin, increase receptors, make the gap closer. Anything else? Yes.
Increase the speed in which transmit those to the receptor.
Okay, so speed of transmission.